Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt. I found you. You found me on this Thursday, May 7th, in the year of the plague 2020. We are over 72,000 dead Americans. The numbers are kind of staggering worldwide. Thank you, China. This is all China's fault, and you know that. I'm going to have the perfect person to speak to this today. Jimmy Lai is going to join me, the founder of Aplly Daily, billionaire extraordinaire, Hong Kong activist, arrested twice by the Chinese Communist Party, is going to call me from Hong Kong in the second hour. Also have Dr. Michael Oren calling in from Israel today because they've passed the laws they need in the Knesset. Chuck Todd will be along. Transportation Secretary Elaine Chao will join me. Senator Marco Rubio, David Deptula, General Deptula will be along. But I begin with a very prosaic thing. I begin with you. I've got a new column up at the Washington Post. It's on the front page. I would encourage you to send it everywhere. I would encourage you to read it and reflect on it because it's about you. It reads, what is wrong with Beltway bicyclists? Is there a significant overlap between people on two wheels and the anti-vaxxer crowd? A similar disdain for expert opinion or just simple logic? Perhaps this is a problem with bicyclists everywhere. Certainly, bikers, runners, and walkers have never been fast friends anywhere in the country. The sung injunction in the musical Oklahoma that, quote, the farmer and the cowman should be friends, has a modern iteration among these outdoor tribes of bikers and runners and walkers. And certainly, bikers and cars have collided often enough to terrible and tragic consequences, as bad as any range war from the previous centuries. But most bikers in the trundling communities have figured out a détente over the years on the various paths that are open to them both. Now, however, the bicyclists seem monumentally ignorant or stunningly indifferent to their potential capacity to spread the coronavirus, especially to older people who use the paths to get their walks or runs in. In the 6 weeks since returning to the Beltway, locked down and rocked by the shutdown, I've logged 200 plus miles on the street. Actually 250, but I wanted to be a little bit humble in this column. And the pedestrian paths and mall sidewalk that I have trundled upon reflect a growing awareness among pedestrians of the need to wear masks or scarves or a kerchief of some sort. In fact, it's grown dramatically. Taken longer for some of the older folks to get this about protecting others. That's what masks do. They don't do any good for you, but they protect others. But generally, I think about 3 out of 4 of the walkers, maybe even higher, of the runners are wearing a face covering, a scarf, a mask, something. I would flip that number for the bicycling community, and that's being generous. This community, the bikers, seems not to understand what asymptomatic means. The science is thus far silent, neither confirming nor denying the risk. Lindsay Marr, a, quote, expert in the airborne transmission of viral disease and a professor of civil engineering at Virginia Tech, told Wire magazine that the risks posed by bicyclers or runners are still unclear. We need to keep in mind, though, she said, that we don't yet know what size particles released by an infected person actually contain virus and whether the virus is alive or can still infect others, Marr said. Bottom line can go either way. We don't know yet. We can't figure it out. So let me spell out the potential risk. Perfectly healthy feeling people, athletic, in shape, feeling just fine, thank you, and terrifically fit people could be super spreaders of the virus. Like a fertilizer spreader used by your neighbor who's crazy about having the perfect carpet of green grass, a virus-spreading asymptomatic bicyclist could be shedding a cloud of virus, especially those carrying droplets. As one doctor, a psychiatrist consulting on COVID-related psychosis in the intensive care unit, told me on this show Monday, some of you heard her. She said, quote, bicyclists are at exactly the right height to hit everyone they pass. I can see uncovered bikers coming at me, so I do my best to make way and increase distance. But I can't see them coming from behind me. And that last second, on your left, warning doesn't work when it comes to virus risk mitigation. I genuinely don't mind sharing the right of way or even unsafe speeds at which many bikers routinely travel. But can't you just wear a mask or a scarf? To those who say that's a sort of a Larry David kind of complaint, I point them to the savage paths even non-lethal cases of the virus take among thousands of people. There's also a variation of this complaint growing among food shoppers who cannot believe that their fellow Americans are strolling up and down store aisles without masks. That, quote, debate has spilled over onto social media, and the militant wear the damn mask folks have been derided as scold culture. Not an answer, of course, but another page from the anti-vaxxer playbook to divert from the discussion and belittle your opponent. The anti-mask crowd are just anti-vaxxers. Better educated, maybe, less likely to think of themselves as anti-science, but they're anti-vaxxers. Another doctor, a kidney specialist, told me on Monday getting this virus is, quote, a hell of a gamble. If you're one of the group known to be vulnerable, older than 65 or obese or with hypertension, in a compromised immune system, or some combo thereof, getting the virus is like a shootout in a classic Western. You might not get hit. If you get hit, you might not die. If you get hit, it's going to cause a lot of pain. I do not get it. I've taken to running in the street and getting honked at by oncoming cars with drivers pointing to the adjacent bike paths. If that's you, the driver that's pointing at me, understand I'm doing risk assessment and mitigation. At least I can see those cars coming at me and I can adjust. They're less of a risk than 50 to 100 cyclists zipping by in both directions on a bike path, 9 out of 10 of whom will wear a helmet to protect themselves, but not a mask because, well, you know, that's inconvenient. So that's up at the Post. It's got 600 comments in the first few hours because the anti-vax people are all indignant. How dare you? There's no science. The fact is there is no science. I linked to the Wired magazine that has all the science that says, yeah, it's a risk, and some of the people say it's not a risk. You don't know, I don't know, nobody knows. That means it could be a risk. That means you're being profoundly indifferent to the people you go by. Some of you are making a statement about yourself. It's a statement, in my eyes, that you're not particularly caring of your fellow human being. It's a statement, in my eyes, that you actually don't give a damn about people except yourself. If you're wearing a helmet and you're biking, that's the worst because you care about yourself but not other people. And if you're in a store without a mask, you're just absolutely proverbial spitting on the people who work there. And a lot of you, I won't wear a mask. This is America. Yeah, it's America. And you don't have to wear a mask. You can be an ass. That's what you are. 1-800-520-123. You can wave a flag at me and do all that kind of stuff. You're not as conservative as I am. You didn't come here and work for Reagan when you were 23. You haven't been complaining about the Soviets, Russia, and the People's Republic of China for 40 years. You really haven't. You've got nothing on me. I'm a missionary to the left. You right-wingers who say you're brave and all that kind of. Look, you try working at MSNBC for a few years. Mr. Right-wing hero. Mrs. I'm for freedom. The mask thing is about science, not about politics. And yesterday there was a story in the Washington Post that chilled me to the bone. There are 50 cases in the United States, only 50, thank God, of a mysterious new illness at children, 100 worldwide. The pediatric specialists are all linked up. There are 1,800 of them comparing notes. And the kid illness is what scared me the most from the beginning. I talked about it yesterday with the vice president. If this thing turns towards kids, it's going to mean the whole world's going to be wrapped in a shroud of grief. The kids get this thing that's very similar to Kawasaki syndrome, but it's different. Sharp pains, inflamed organs. And look, you may not be responsible for that, but if you're not wearing a mask, collectively you are. If you're not wearing a mask, you're actually responsible for all these deaths because you don't care. You're just being indifferent. You're just being a total selfish person. 1-800-520-1234. Bring your America at me. 1-800-520-1234. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Birch Gold Group.
Welcome back, America. Mike in Fort Worth, Texas. I'll let you pound your chest a little bit, Mike. Good morning. How are you?
Morning, Hugh. How's it going?
I'm great, thank you.
Hey, I got a theory. Just bear with me for a minute. But as far as the mask, I think Trump should wear a mask. You have to set an example. You got to lead by example. That's what you teach your kids, your grandkids. Hey, you got to lead by example. But
Well,
hey,
Mike, I don't bring in the president and the vice president because they get tested every day and they have the rapid machines at the White House. I'm talking about the average Joe or Jane in a store or on a bike path or walking around a street or gathering. I mean, I know the president and the vice president should set good examples when they go out, but if they're in the White House, they're safe. I'm not wearing a mask right now. I'm in my studio. There's nobody here but me. I'm not going to wear a mask when I'm in. So if you don't need to wear a mask, I'm not saying, but if you're outdoors, you need to wear a mask. That's it.
Right.
Hey,
yeah, you do. I don't wear a mask when I go in sometime myself. But you really got to stay 6 feet away. But, I think it's safer to wear one. But, hey, Hugh, this is my theory. You're not going to agree with it, but I think Trump will be defeated in.
All right, it's enough. I'm not interested in that. I'm not talking about that right now. Ron in Pennsylvania. Go ahead, Ron.
Hey, good morning, Mr. Hewitt. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Oh, wow. I haven't heard that in a while. Hello, long-time listener, first-time caller. You're mad at me about masks?
No, I'm laid off work temporarily, but I'm usually walking to work in the morning. Summer, winter, I listen to you every morning.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Yeah. I just want to make an observation about the mask. Now you wear glasses, right, like I do. We have corrective lenses.
Yep.
And you turn the wrong way, and your darn glasses fog up.
Yep.
Every fifth breath, you get a little film on you. That is the vapor getting beyond the mask. So the mask is not okay. So we're on board with that. We're also not too sure about this virus.
No, we are very sure about the virus. The science I have posted.
The size of the virus, I should say. The size of the virus is, everything I've read, is 0.03 microns.
We're not sure about the size. You're right about that.
Well, yeah, but from everything I've read, they're saying it's about a 0.3 micron.
Again, there's differences of opinion. I've read all the science. They don't really know yet.
Something that's small, putting a piece of paper or a piece of cloth, you're going to slow the velocity of your breath down. No doubt about it. I'm not, it's better.
That's
than
it. That's it, though, Ron. Even though it fogs your glasses, and my scarf does fog my glasses, I know what you're talking about.
Every time you're breathing, that stuff's getting out. It's getting
but Ron, less of it is getting out. Less of it. It's risk mitigation. It's not risk solution. It's risk mitigation. It's why you drive 35 in a school zone and not 55. You're not going to hit a kid when you drive through a school zone at 55, 1,000,000 out of 1,000,001 times. But you don't do it in order to risk mitigate, not for anything you're doing, but because kids dart from between cars. I do not understand why people don't, and thank you for the call, Ron, keep walking over. I don't understand why they don't get risk mitigation. It's not about you. It's about other people. If you have the opportunity to lower the worldwide risk, you will lower the worldwide prevalence. I want to tell people as well, the Washington Post article that you need to read from yesterday, headline, children are falling ill with a perplexing inflammatory syndrome thought to be linked to COVID-19. This is the worst news possible. At first, there was a handful of puzzling cases. June Nurnberger called. Other doctors contacted her, describing children with COVID-19 coming into emergency rooms in bad shape with a kind of inflammatory shock syndrome affecting multiple organs. By Saturday night, Nurnberger and 18 other worried pediatric specialists, including representatives CDC and the NIH, convened on Zoom to discuss the phenomenon. Not in my lifetime have I seen anything remotely similar to what's going on right now, said the medical director of Boston Children's Hospital. The cases appear to have the characteristics of an illness known as Kawasaki disease. It's dangerous. It's not widespread, but it ought to remind all you selfish people who aren't wearing a mask. You don't know what you're doing. You have no idea what you're doing. So mitigate what you're doing, even as we go about reopening the country. Just be smart. I'll be right back on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Prison Fellowship's Angel Tree Summer Camps. Click on the banner at hughhewitt.com.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Before I take your angry phone call, I knew I would make people mad because I'm right and you're wrong. You should be wearing a mask. When you're outside and you're anywhere near people, especially if you're in a store, you should be wearing a mask. The science is clear and you're a dummy if you're not. And don't give me that America stuff. And I think the demonstrations are nutty, and I think I wouldn't go to them either. The country's opening up as fast as we can, and your own. I want the country to open up. I want it to be safe and socially distanced. I do not want children to get this. I want people to act like normal Americans, like they did in World War II, VE Day, 75th anniversary tomorrow. I want you to be patriots. I want you to wear a mask. Heck, after 9/11, we asked you to go shopping. The only thing people are asking you to do now is wear a mask or a headscarf or something like that, because you can give the disease to someone who will die. And the odds are less that you will do so if you wear a mask. And you cannot argue with the fact that we don't know. And in the absence of knowledge, you take a precaution. It isn't very difficult. Now, the column's got 616 comments already. And believe it or not, I actually have some positive comments today. Normally, it's just the trolls at the Washington Post hating on Trump. I mean, there are those people are anyway. But send it to your sister-in-law who says, I'm not going to wear a mask. You're not. Send it to your dopey uncle who's pounding the table. Like, can't find me for wearing a mask. I'm not wearing a mask. No, they're just dummies. I asked him for the headline, right? The headline has gone through 3 iterations. They first said it was a plea from a jogger. It's not a plea. I don't need their help. I can avoid them. I found her out. Then they changed it to whether biking or shopping, just wear the mask. I want him to write, hey, dummy, wear the damn mask. That was my headline. They wouldn't use that as a headline. Hey, dummy, put on the damn mask. Before I get you mad at me, let me ask all of you who are calling in to pound your chest about how you don't have to wear a mask. Would you at least support the kids at Angel Tree? They got a mom or dad in prison. They, not follow their own. If they've got a parent who's got 5 to 10 or life, and their life is difficult. Fatherless kids in America have got every single indicator going against them. Some will overcome. A lot of them because Angel Tree gets involved, Prison Fellowship gets involved. We need a contribution of $200 per child that we help. Hundreds of you are already in line. Thank you. I need thousands, because there are, sadly, hundreds of thousands of such children. We can only do it one at a time. Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I will take care of 5 of them. Here's the deal. A handful of the camps are going to open. I heard yesterday they're actually kind of optimistic about more than a handful. They're playing it like everybody else, a day at a time. Can we get the counselors? Can we open up the dreaded, dust-filled, children screaming, short-sheeted bunks of your youth going? Camp Notre Dame in Lake Erie, I hope you're open. And can we get these kids there? It costs $200 a kid to get them there. If they can't, we don't forget the kid. Angel Tree never forgets the family. They take care of them at Christmas and the summer. They'll give them a box of blessings. Good food coupons. They're not going to run down and get French fries. They get good food and sporting equipment to get them outdoors, away from the video games. I mean, the screen time in this country's gone crazy. It's not great for kids. But Angel Tree is there to help the kids whose mom and dad aren't there. And I need your help, so thank you. Let me also, before you call up and yell at me because I'm not wearing no mask. You're one of those guys. Let me tell you about Birch Gold. Because there's probably an overlap here between people who want to bike without a mask and people who, because they're fit and in shape and they know what they're doing. And they're probably in shape investors and they're wondering, what am I going to do about this stock market? Birch Gold is the answer. Text my name, Hugh, H-U-G-H, to 474747. Right? The Dow yesterday went down 218 points. The NASDAQ went up 45 and the S&P went down 29. That's a weird market. Today overseas, everything's green in Japan, England, and Germany. The Chinese markets, Hong Kong, Shanghai, they just don't matter to me. They're run by bandits. You just have no idea what's going on there. But Germany and England are feeling pretty optimistic. Crude is up again. That's the best sign of the economy, figuring it out. It's up 8% to $26 a barrel. Gold is down below 1,700 again, so it's a great entry point. I've been saying that's the best entry point when it's around 1,700. Well, it's a few bucks below 1,700. So go to hughgold.com. or text my name, Hugh, H-U-G-H, to 474747. All right, to the phones. Let's start with John in Kentucky. Hey, John, good morning.
Good morning, Hugh. Basically, I just wanted to know if, they're talking about having second rounds of this in the fall or maybe a third round later on. How are we ever going to develop any kind of a herd immunity if we're all continually wearing masks?
Well, we're going to get a vaccine.
Are we going to wear masks forever?
No, I think we're going to wear masks for a year and a half till we get a vaccine or a therapeutic. When you tell me that there's something that will cure kids, especially, and cure young adults who get it, and yeah, older adults too, then I'm done with a mask. If they can give you a shot, I mean, if you don't have to go to the ICU and get put on a ventilator, we're going to get through this. Not a pessimistic. I'm not going to be one of those people.
Coronavirus also?
Yeah, it is. That's
they can't
relevant.
Vaccinate that either, right?
Not yet, and we've never worked hard on it.
We may never have a vaccine.
But, John, we might. And so, in the meantime, wear a mask.
All right. Well, thank you, Hugh. I appreciate you.
Thank you. I mean, in the meantime, we'll figure it out, right? You just wear a mask for a year. Then if you decide that, we got to go, everyone's going to die, who's going to have to die, that's the only way to get rid of it, take your mask off. Yeah, tell people that. Wear that sign. Cheryl in Chicago. Good morning, Cheryl.
You.
How are you? I'm good.
Good. I agree with the mask. I just don't know if I agree with the mask for everyone in every situation. That's. I think it depends on where you live. I think if you're in a rural area, I think if you're in a very dense area, the situations are very different. So
I don't wear it on an empty street. I wear a scarf that I can put on and take off. I do not wear it on an empty street.
Okay, and that's what I believe. I think every state needs to evaluate this on a case.
This is the state can't actually legislate this. This has got to be a cultural thing. But I want people to know that if I pass you on a street and you're not wearing a mask, and I've had to go 8 feet out of my way and cross the street, I think you're a moron. And if I go shopping, and I don't go shopping much because I'm waiting for this thing to get the therapeutic, and I see a couple of youngsters going past old people with masks, and the youngsters don't have on a mask, I think you're endangering those old people. What morons are you? And yes. I just think it's selfish. It's just selfish.
Yes, but I think that there should be some guidance as far as how to wear the mask. Although the states can't legislate, they should be able to give guidance.
Oh, they can, and there are a lot of tutorials online. And freedom masks, they're good masks, they're bad masks. But basically, any mouth covering does a good job of preventing droplet spread. And I tweeted, go over to my Twitter, you'll see the respiratory spread of a bicyclist. They're the worst. Thank you, Cheryl. Chris in Pennsylvania. Hi, Chris. You're on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Hugh, this is such an interesting topic because you are a very smart person, and we have diametrically different views on this.
Well, then I'm right. Then I'm right,
well,
right?
Two people can't be right, and you're not right.
No, I am right, but go ahead.
So you want to mitigate the damage that could be caused, and we just heard that the overall issue here is when people are at home. So you must be wearing your mask at home, right?
No, because there's nobody here.
What about your wife?
My wife and I cannot not be together. So you're going to have some people to whom you are exposed.
But you just defeated your main point that you're trying to stop the spread.
No, I didn't.
And 66% occurs at the house.
Chris, I did not just defeat my main point. My main point is when you are out in public among people with whom you do not know their immunity status, and I happen to know that my wife and I have great immunity status because we're both healthy, thank God, knock on wood, and say a prayer, say your beads. I'm not going to infect her, nor he, and we are both doing our socially distancing thing. There's no one in my studio, and I don't have a mask on. When I have to go to the Rite Aid, or I have to go to the Safeway, I put on a mask. And when I go running, I have a mask. So whenever I come near someone I might hurt, I'm not going to hurt my wife. I just think what you're ignoring is that if you come in contact with someone you don't know anything about, You don't know if they've got immunosuppressed disease. You don't know if they've got HIV. You don't know if they're going through leukemia treatment. You don't know if that person is on a blood thinner. You don't have any idea if that person has MS. They don't wear a sign saying I've got MS.
Right, Hugh. When you're out walking around, what bothers me, and like I said, I don't know why my mindset is different than yours. We're together on so many issues, but when somebody's driving in a car by themselves and they have gloves and a mask on, I look at them
That's not me unless they're going somewhere where they got to get out of the car. I would just ask you, Chris, when you go shopping, do you have to go shopping occasionally to Costco? Do you have to do that?
Hugh, thank the dear Lord, my beautiful wife enjoys doing that, and with my personality, I'm staying away from those places because
you and me both. You and me both, brother. We are blessed, and I can't stand Costco. I hate to go clothes shopping. Yeah. Leave me alone. I'm built for quarantine, right? I'm absolutely built for quarantine. I get pizza delivered, and I am built for quarantine. So here's the key.
Can I just say one more point?
You bet.
Very quickly. So I love to play golf, and we have this rule that really bothers me. There's nobody at the golf course, and from the parking lot to the first tee, you must be wearing a mask when there's nobody there.
Well, that's dumb. Look, I'm not a Nazi. That's dumb. I don't want people to be dumb. I want them to care about people who are coming at them.
Hugh, you do have some common sense. Once in a while, you veer off, and Chris from Malvern has to pull you back in. So I'm glad that you're
Chris,
back in
thank you, buddy. Don't wear a mask when there's nobody around. But if there's a caddy shack there and you got to walk past those kids, understand you don't know what those kids have. Their kids are healthy. No, not all the time. Mitchell in Minnesota. Go ahead, Mitchell. Got to be quick.
As is to mitigate risk, not to eliminate it. And it's the size of the cough particle, not the virus, that the mask stops.
So you're with me.
Bicyclists are, as a rule, arrogant. Not all of them, but most of them. Bye.
Bye. Scooters are worse. The people on the scooters, they're even worse. They're more arrogant than the bicyclists. All right, let me tell you about ReliefFactor.com. I got to get my new bag out soon. I'm down to about 4 packages. It's that time of the day, because there you go. Going out today, right after the show. Beautiful day in the Beltway. I'm going to have my lukewarm coffee. I bet you Urban Meyer wears a mask. Coach, are you wearing a mask? I hope so. Coach is usually on his way to do whatever he does because he's always doing it early. I'll bet you Urban Meyer takes Relief Factor. I don't know if he does. He's in great shape, but I hope he wears a mask. I take ReliefFactor.com every day because I'm going to get my 6 to 8 miles in today, maybe longer. This is a short week. Long week, short week, long week, short week. That's the way you do it if you don't want your back to go completely crazy. And ReliefFactor.com helps you one way or the other. ReliefFactor.com costs $19.95. Tens of thousands of people take it every day. The natural supplement that is preferable to every other natural supplement. Can we quickly get in Joe Biden, cut number 15? This is on Relief Factor as well. Cut number 15,
this
Joe
pandemic.
Biden.
The pandemic is that the president has no intercourse whatsoever with the rest of the world on dealing with these things. We led, like Barack Obama led in the in the pandemic that occurred when we were in office. It was kept in Africa. We organized the world. Yeah. We put things together.
We need to get him some ReliefFactor.com. Stay tuned, America. Welcome back, America. Joined now by Dr. Michael Oren from Israel. He used to be Israel's ambassador to the United States. I hope someday he'll be their ambassador to the United Nations. He joins me this morning, and I don't know if I can talk to him. Twitter banned him for a while, so I don't know if he's radioactive. What was that all about, Michael Oren, getting tossed off of Twitter?
They suspended me. They suspended me, Hugh, and they erased thousands and thousands of followers. So if any of your listeners want to right that wrong, they can follow me on Twitter. I wrote to them. They didn't respond, not for the first articles began to come out in the American press. Then they got back to me within the hour and apologized for putting it in spam. That was their excuse. I think it had to do with a series of tweets that I made last December after the New York Times twice described BDS, Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions, an organization that aspires to destroy the state of Israel, an anti-Semitic organization. New York Times described it as an organization that seeks to end Israel's occupation of the West Bank, which was a lie. It was a deliberate lie. And I said of the New York Times that they cannot condemn anti-Semitism on one hand and then whitewash it with the other. And but I have a sense that triggered it.
Now, when you say erase followers, I'm looking at your Twitter feed, you have 25,000 followers. You were much higher than that. How many did they erase?
They erased them all. That's what's come back in the last couple of days. And
that's amazing. Can't they find the people that were following you and put them back?
I had enough trouble getting them to unsuspend my account.
Did they ever give you? I always think when that happens, it's some 22-year-old goofy intern who just got picked up at Twitter because they're the nephew of somebody who invested early, and they don't know anything about nothing, and so they don't like someone and they erase them. Did they send you a nice letter at least?
A prosaic letter, a bland letter, and they said that my account had been accidentally put into spam.
Oh my gosh!
Okay.
All right.
Really a minor apology, but
all right.
But it reached the press. It went around the world, and then quickly they.
It's a moron's move. Okay, let's get to the government. It appears from the Times of Israel this morning that all the laws that need passing are being passed and the government will stand up. Is that your view?
That is the view. And over the last couple of weeks, I've talked about whether the High Court would approve changes in Israel's basic laws. We don't have a constitution. Like Great Britain, we have a collection of basic laws which set out how governments are formed, how they're elected, how long they stay in office. And you had to change a whole series of laws in order to get a government which basically has two prime ministers on a rotational basis. It has the largest number of ministers in Israeli history and vice ministers. And half the ministers are answerable to one prime minister, and other half of the ministers are answerable to another prime minister. And basically freezes legislation for a half a year for the coronavirus, no high-level appointments. Imagine the White House saying to Congress, you can't pass legislation for half a year. That would require a major constitutional change in the United States as well. I was questioning whether the Supreme Court, which has been a very activist Supreme Court, would step up and say, no, you can't change all these basic laws overnight. But then I also said that the Supreme Court was afraid. They were afraid that they become too activist, that the Knesset would then turn to the Supreme Court and say, you weren't elected, we're the sovereign, you're not, and we're going to override a Supreme Court decision. Well, the Supreme Court, I think, blinked. And what happened is they said, well, we're not going to interfere. There are a lot of questions here, but we're not going to interfere. And the legislation was passed last night, changes to the basic law, May 13th, another couple of days, and Israel will finally have, after a very long break, we'll finally have a government.
So tell me about the security situation on 75 years after victory in Europe, 75 years after the last camp was liberated. Where is Israel today in terms of its security?
I look back to May 8th, 1945, VE Day. My father we still have at home, my parents' home, the flyers that were dropped by B-17 bombers over Europe saying, Nazis quit. That was the headline.
Oh, wow.
And all the world was dancing. All the world was dancing, except for one man, David Ben-Gurion, who was the future prime minister of Israel, our founding father, who wrote in his diary, it's very sad. It's sad because a third of the world's Jews had been killed and massacred by the Nazis. Now, who on May 8th would think that 3 years after that, almost to the day, May 14th, 1948, a sovereign Jewish state would be created in the state of Israel? And it would defend itself against invasions. It would absorb 100,000 millions of refugees. It would create a democracy in the Middle East. It would create a thriving, flourishing intellectual and technological life. And it's amazing when you look from a historical perspective what this state has done. And today, Israel faces no conventional threats. We've had peace with Egypt, peace with Jordan. The Syrians are busy elsewhere. Our biggest threat is still terror in the form of Hezbollah and Hamas and Iran, and Iran's nuclear project. So we can't, rest on any laurels. And there was a rocket fired the other night from Gaza, for example. We still have to deal with this. But from an historical perspective, this is nothing short of probably the greatest story in modern history.
You're right. I mean, it's as we celebrate VE Day tomorrow, we also have to celebrate that as night follows day and as day follows night, Israel arose from the ashes, and that's a great thing. Dr. Michael Oren, you can follow him on Twitter, and you should. Dr. Michael Oren. Dr. Michael Oren. Get him back his hundreds of thousands, and I hope we see you in Turtle Bay soon, Michael Oren. Don't go anywhere, America. Hour number 2 of the Hugh Hewitt Show begins with General Deptula. Stay with us.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by patternsofevidence.com.
Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Greetings. Lots ahead today. Chuck Todd will be along next hour. Transportation Secretary Elaine Chao, Florida Senator Marco Rubio. Jimmy Lai is going to join me from Hong Kong in a couple of segments. But I begin this hour with Lieutenant General David Deptula, Dean of the Mitchell Institute for Aerospace Studies. General Deptula, of course, retired Lieutenant General in the Air Force. Good morning, General. How are you?
Hey, very good, Hugh. How are you doing today?
Great. You know, I always assume that my two flag officers who are retired, you and Admiral Stavridis, who come on, are always reading, because I've never met a flag officer, retired or on active duty, who wasn't a reader. So I've been reading this book, Freedom's Forge, by Arthur Herman, about how America went from 0 to 100 miles an hour in war production. I mean, 250,000 bombers in 5 years, bombers and fighters. It's astonishing. And I am curious, as we approach VE Day, General Deptula, this is, you never know what I'm going to ask you, right? You just show up here and I throw stuff at you.
No, I don't, which drives me nuts, but that's okay. I enjoy it.
Well, here's the deal. I know you've been reading your whole life. When you read about air power in World War II, do you think, who was right? Who predicted its role, which was neither decisive, but without which a necessary but sufficient condition to win the war was air power? Who got it right back then?
Holy cow. Well, there are a lot of people, I think, immediately back to, and I think you had mentioned a naval officer who, if forgive me, I can't remember the name, but may have been a relative of yours, who forecast what happened at Pearl Harbor. There's another guy who's pretty famous that people don't recall forecast Pearl Harbor over a decade before it happened, and that is the namesake of our institution, General Billy Mitchell.
Oh, I didn't know that Mitchell was, Joe Tossig was my wife's grandfather, and he got fired by FDR for saying that in a Senate hearing. I didn't know Billy Mitchell saw it coming.
Absolutely. It was over a decade in advance. He was out there in the Pacific, and he foretold what was going to happen. So Mitchell was one of the greatest advocates for the applicability of air power. He started very young. He caused a lot of consternation, but he got things done. He was early on, but when you get to the actual war, one of the great books out there is entitled A Few Great Captains. There's another one called Winged Victory by Geoffrey Perot. That gives insights into the incredible work that the men and women. Now, men only flew in combat during that time, but the women, back to the book that you just mentioned, were critical in building the industrial base, the United States, that got to the point where they were turning out bombers at more than one in every few minutes.
It's an amazing story. In fact, General Doolittle was on a tour with, it was then Major Doolittle, with Bill Knudsen, who was in charge of all this before Pearl Harbor. And he said, this is great, but we're going to have to triple, quadruple, and quintuple what we're doing. And people looked at him like they were nuts. And yet America was able to do that. And if we hadn't done it, we wouldn't have ruled the skies.
No, it's absolutely true. And you mentioned Jimmy Doolittle. He's another stalwart, which was just an incredible individual, not to mention the bravery of leading the Doolittle raid off the carrier Hornet in April of 1941, which just completely shocked the Japanese and boosted the morale of America. And then, of course, the other individual I've got to mention is General Hap Arnold, who oversaw the entire effort, and just a fascinating individual. I mean, there's so much that we can learn from history that, as you mentioned, is important, because if we don't read it, we're bound to maybe not replicate it completely, but history certainly has a rhyme with what's going on today.
General Deptula, one of the things I've been listening to this book and thinking about Stanley Baldwin, who's the British Prime Minister in the 30s, said the bomber will always get through, and the fighter proved that that wasn't the case. They couldn't bring Britain to their knees with the bomber. At the same time, Curtis LeMay and others thought the bomber will drive the enemy to their knees. That wasn't true either. Since that original standoff, which is it's a necessary but not sufficient condition to victory, has any basic recognition of air power changed?
Yeah, I saw that what happened, and if you advance from World War II to what occurred in Desert Storm, the early forefathers of air power had theories, and they believed what could be accomplished from the air in terms of getting to the heart of an adversary, crippling his leadership, paralyzing his ability to operate, immobilizing the military. Well, the accuracies in World War II simply didn't allow that to happen. By the time we got to Desert Storm, technology had gotten to the point where it realized the theories of early pioneers. So in Desert Storm, it was a 43-day operation. Air power and air power alone operated for the first 40 of those 43 days. And it wasn't until the end, after the Iraqi military had completely been collapsed and forced to disengage, that we went in with ground forces to reoccupy the country of Kuwait that the Iraqis have invaded. But that was a war that was completely dominated by air power. So, we need all of our forces, but given the conditions of a particular situation, air power can be decisive, and it has been before. The other example is Operation Allied Force in 1999, where air power brought Milosevic to his knees and completed that operation without any other surface forces being involved. So,
yeah, General, after every time you're on, I always get an email from my buddy, a retired Marine Corps general, who always says, boy, Deptula was great, but he didn't say blank, blank, blank. And it's always about the fact you got to have someone bang in the door. I mean, it's always about that. So like clockwork, I'm going to hear that today about how Kosovo.
Well, that's fine. Listen, the fact of the matter is, where we've gotten today is the air power is the indispensable force. There are no joint force operations, period, without some element of air and space power being involved. And then think about that. You can't say that about any other service.
That's true. Now, I do want to ask you before we run out of time. Victory in Europe was necessary because of the unmanned V1 and V2. I mean, they were just killing civilians left and right. I saw this week that Boeing trotted out a giant unmanned freight vehicle. I mean, giant. Is the future, General Deptula, that we're not going to need pilots for anything anymore?
No, it's not. And by the way, yours truly was the one that oversaw for 4 years the dramatic increase in unmanned vehicles in the Air Force between 2006 and 2010. So there's not a bigger advocate of unmanned aerial vehicles in the military than I. But we will always have human beings in aircraft and spacecraft, whether or not it's technologically feasible to extract them, simply because we have not gotten to the point where we've been able to automate decision-making capability better than the gray matter that resides between a human being's two ears.
Isn't that just a matter of time, though, General, when AI catches up?
Not within our lifetimes. And I go back to, let's look at the psychological piece. Hugh, are you going to be comfortable walking on an airplane once we are able to fly again, and look to the left where the cockpit is and see nothing, and then going back and sit down?
Well, that's how I've done my radio show for years. I look in the producer's room and there's nothing. So I honestly, I don't know. When you come back next week, let's talk about this, because I think AI and flight. If we can have driverless cars, I'm a lot happier with a driverless airplane than a driverless car. because there's nobody in between, right?
Okay, how about a driverless airplane carrying nuclear weapons?
No, not so much. Agree.
There you go.
Agree on. Okay, we'll talk about that next week. General Deptula, General David Deptula is the Dean of the Mitchell Institute for Aerospace Studies. Follow him on Twitter. It's really a great feed, at Deptula_David. I mean, I've had I've had a producer room with nobody in it for a long time. I think that's like an airplane, I think. I'll be right back, America. 1-800-520-1234. Wear the mask. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show brought to you by Sierra Pacific Mortgage. For more info, call 888-888-1172.
22 minutes after the hour, America. My voice a little shot because we did a Zoom wake last night for my friend Johnny Phillips. I told you about him earlier this week. This was an unusual but fun experience. Not losing Johnny, that was not fun. We miss him greatly, but a bunch of his buddies got together. Philip and Paul Mokras, Scott and Kim Phillips, Mark Wolschlag, Rob Ganeri, Patty G. You sit around, and because I'm a radio guy, I don't like silence, right? So, because in fact, in the radio world, if you have an 8-second gap, did you know that if you have an 8-second gap, all of the radio's signals down the line flip over to the pre-recorded show from the day before because they assume that Dwayne blew up the studio.
The axiom that they taught us when we first started doing radio is long periods of silence are followed by even longer periods of unemployment.
That's also true. Long periods of silence are followed by longer periods of unemployment and by pre-recorded shows. So if you ever hear yesterday's show, that means something went down in Dallas, and it's Tom Tradip's fault. But normally we never go out there. But of course, when you do a Zoom, that means I'm suspicious of silence. I've trained for 30 years not to allow dead air. So I talk too much on these things. But we had a funny. You would not believe the people who come up. All right, I'm not going to name names, but if you start running around with a gang when they're 12 and you run around with them until you're 22, you got 10 years of stories, and we all told them. And often young ladies are involved, right? The pursuit of young ladies occupied, and golf. And I taught most of these guys how to golf. Philip Mokras could not hit a green were it not for me. And so we talked about the fact there's a famous golf pro who taught everyone how to golf. And that was basically me to these guys. And so one of them was sitting on the fairway, Kim. And I pointed out that was pretty much the best hole on that course. I mean, I own that. And we all caddied. I was the best caddy. I had the best eyesight. And it was just great fun, but I'm a little bit throaty today. I would strongly recommend for your kicks and giggles, get 8 or 9 of your high school buddies together and just do a Zoom. And luckily no one's dead. Hopefully you won't have to celebrate a life. But we got to celebrate Johnny's life. And the fact that if you're in St. Pete's Beach and you're listening this morning in Sarasota and Tampa Bay, you knew Johnny. Everybody did. Like the mayor of St. Pete's Beach. He was actually on the city council forever. And at the Hideaway, I think it was called the Hideaway Bar, he would hold court on the picnic tables at the Hideaway Bar. And when I was down there for the 2012 convention, basically everybody in town came by and said hello to Johnny. And we just laughed and laughed. But I got no voice. I finally ended it at 8:30 after an hour and a half. Said, I got to stop talking. I got to go to bed. I got to do some show prep. I got, Jimmy Lai calling in from Hong Kong and Chuck Todd. But we had a great time. I recommend it highly. Let me do a pre-market report for you, if I can find it, because I'm not as well prepared as I normally am. There it is. This is brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com. If you're out there looking to buy a home, and you should be because the interest rate's up to 0.71%, 0.71%, that's up from 0.58% to, that means it's starting to firm up. Everybody knows what's going on. Greatest mortgage rates in history. Best refinance. Now, don't do it because you just refinanced last month and you want to save, can I save $25? Some people need AndrewandTodd.com right now. They got to get money out of their house. They got to do a reverse mortgage. They're a veteran. They realize with a 100% financing, they can buy a house that they've always dreamed of. AndrewandTodd.com or with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. Give them a call, 888-888-1172. They will take care of you. A special word to seniors. If you're caught in a financial crunch and you own your home and you have equity, do a reverse mortgage. Do it with AndrewandTodd.com. You can trust these guys. That's the most important deal. Yesterday, the Dow went down 218 and the NASDAQ went up 45. That's called a mixed market. But overseas this morning, both England and Germany are up between 0.75% and 1%. That means good news for America today. I don't know where the market's going to go today, but I'm feeling pretty good about Amazon at least, which had a good day yesterday and looks to have another very strong day today as the world begins to settle in to a slow roll opening And business likes that. Business likes that a lot. Stay tuned, America. I'll be back with Hong Kong's Jimmy Lai next on The Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt inside the Beltway. It's been my pleasure over 30 years in broadcast to talk to a lot of very successful people, very powerful people, very courageous people. Rarely do they all combine in one guest like they do in Jimmy Lai from Hong Kong, the businessman extraordinaire, a billionaire, a democratic activist in the city of Hong Kong. Joins me. He's been arrested twice this year. He is released right now. We're not going to talk about the circumstances of the cases that have been alleged against him, but I am so honored to have you on, Jimmy Lai. Welcome to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning to you.
Happy to have me. Thank you.
Would you begin by giving us a sketch of your current circumstances and how you're feeling right now about the future in Hong Kong?
Okay, I was arrested in February with another two Democrats, and the reason for the arrest was that we had illegal assembly because last year we took on the street to demonstrate without the permit of the police. Actually, we had the constitutional right to demonstrate, but the police need to know to say that they don't object it. We don't have that permit of non-objection, and that's why they arrest us and accuse us of illegal assembly. So, on the a few days ago, they arrest us again together with another. We are altogether 15 people, including our grandfather of democracy movement, Mr. Martin Lee, who is 81 years old.
Wow.
So this arrest is very obvious and intimidation of all of the people who are moderate, but dare to walk on the street to demonstrate. So these moderate people are the 2 million, 1 million, 1.5 million people who always went out. The purpose of this is to intimidate these moderate Hong Kong people, which is a majority, won't dare to go out to demonstrate again, so they can isolate the more radical young people who confront the police. Because if the small group of radical are isolated, they can easily handle them.
But they can't handle millions. Jimmy Lai, when I was in Hong Kong a year ago...
They cannot handle the millions and millions, yes.
When I was in Hong Kong a year ago, I have never seen a better organized city, a more wonderful city, a cleaner city. I mean, it's dense, but it's so amazing. Why is the mainland so intent on breaking the deal of one country, two systems? Why not just let Hong Kong flourish like it always has?
Well, I think for dictatorship, for tyrant like Xi Jinping, control is their second nature. They want to control. And Hong Kong people who share the same value as the Western world because of our colonial legacy. So we have the rule of law, we have the freedom of speech, we have the property right, we have the freedom of religion, we have the freedom of assembly, we have all that freedom institution which Chinese people in China don't have, which is a form in the eye of Xi Jinping. Because if we have all this freedom that they cannot control us as they can control the Chinese people, he just can't bear with it, because we may become a beacon of the Western value to influence the people in China, which is what he is afraid of.
I think you've already done that. I think the whole world is watching Hong Kong. They're watching you, Jimmy Lai, and saying, whatever happens to Jimmy, we're going to know about. I am curious. The People's Republic of China's Chinese Communist Party has never had this low of standing since 1972 when President Nixon went. It has never been this
definitely.
unpopular, never this reviled. Do they not
Exactly.
understand that if they crack down on Hong Kong, it will go even lower? Or is there a recognition that they have screwed up royally for a year and a half about everything?
Well, I think they expect a censure of the Western world, especially America, in the aftermath of the virus. So for them, if the outside world attack them, the more they have to counterattack and be more aggressive because they need enemies. The worse is the situation, the more the Chinese government needs enemies to unite the people, so the people will ignore the sufferings they endure during the pandemic. So at the same time, the world is against China and its relationship with the world is at its lowest. Maybe it's an opportunity. China wants to get Hong Kong totally under control, regardless of whatever measure they have to use.
Now, Jimmy Lai, do people understand that the American people, at least, love the Chinese people? We love Hong Kong. We want to have a great relationship, but that the party, and particularly Xi Jinping, is the problem. It's not the Chinese people. It's the Communist Party, and particularly, I think it's President Xi. Do the Chinese people understand the American people are not their enemy?
Well, I think they know. I mean, the people know it. I'm sure the people know it. But also the propaganda in China, and also when the communists, when the CCP creates an outside enemy that can easily sway the sentiment of the people to unite together to confront the outside enemy. This is the Chinese sentiment, because Chinese always have the feeling that the outside, the foreign country always humiliate them. That was the past history that make them very sensitive to outside enemies. And this is one advantage the Communist Party in China can use to unite the people by creating outside enemies. Now, the outside is definitely against China by letting the violence to spread and destroy so much money, so many lives, and impose so much suffering on the free world.
But when I talk to the Secretary of State, Jimmy, when I talked to Tom Cotton, when I talked to the Vice President yesterday, they all make a distinction between the party and the people. They are not upset with the people at all. And so does the propaganda inside of the People's Republic of China actually work? It's so ridiculous to blame anyone other than Xi Jinping. Does it actually work?
Well, it works on some people. It won't work on others. But I think the world can help the Chinese people very much. Is that to advocate freedom of speech in China for the Chinese people. The reason is that if this time the Chinese people had freedom of speech, the doctors who first discovered the virus, Li Menliang, would be able to put the news into the social media and let everybody know instead of reprimand, so everybody can have the information and protect themselves. The virus would have been contained and would not have spread it to the world and create such a suffering for so many millions of people.
So, Jimmy, this is the key question. This is the most important. America's big tech company. Yeah, tell me how America's are America's big tech companies, Google and Facebook, are they helping or hurting free speech in China right now?
Well, they're not in China. They're not in China.
Are they selling the technology that China's Communist Party need to control?
China have their social media, but they're all censored. You know,
right.
but the Chinese always say that freedom of speech is internal affair. But if this lack of freedom of speech jeopardizes the life and the national security of the outside world, this is the international security concern. The world has the right to ask China to grant its people the right of freedom of speech.
Absolutely. How most can Americans help in that? How do we help do that?
Well, I think your president, like your Secretary of State, your politicians can advocate this, and the people the people in America will advocate it. When the world advocates it, China will have nowhere to turn, and the people in China, if they know that the world is advocating freedom of speech, they will all stand up and be able to overcome the fear for just 10 minutes. I think the Communist Party will have to give in.
My last question, Jimmy. Are you afraid, and how do you overcome that fear when you are afraid?
No, I never allow fear to influence me, because the Chinese is very skillful in inducing fear in you. If I fear, I won't be able to do anything. Every time I ask myself, what is the consequences? Then I will be able to I can't do anything. You know, I don't think about the consequences. The only thing I think about is this is the fight we have to fight. Without the rule of law, without the freedom, we have nothing. There's no question we have to fight.
Jimmy Lai, good luck to you. God bless you. And we will continue to advocate. We'll follow you. We will watch on Twitter. And we will do whatever we can from America to make sure that people are watching Hong Kong, because it is absolutely vital that free speech and your activist movement continue during and after the virus. Thank you for joining me this morning.
Yes. Freedom of speech for Chinese people, please.
Freedom of speech for the Chinese people, please. We will repeat that. We will repeat that. We will repeat that. Thank you, Jimmy. I got to tell you, that's pretty remarkable, America. That's a guy who's in the middle of Hong Kong, and he is the most visible pro-free speech activist opposite Xi Jinping. He is it, the most visible, and the only thing we can do is follow him, use his hashtag, and bravo. That's what we can do. Okay, let me, free speech on America depends upon the ability to advertise. I love relieffactor.com because they keep me on the air. They keep all of us on the air because the product that they sell, relieffactor.com, helps you stay healthy, wealthy, and physically fit. And they keep me on the air, and that's why you should support them and all of our sponsors. Not only them, but honorboundcoffee.com, which they also run, where 100% of the profits support the military men and women around the globe. But relieffactor.com has a starter pack, $19.95. Go out and get it. Use it. We're going to post the Jimmy Lai interview over at HughHewitt.com, and I encourage you to read it, send it around to people, and I encourage you to go get relieffactor.com, and I encourage you to come back right after the break, because lots more ahead today. Talking with Jim Talent about this when we come back. Don't go anywhere.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by No Safe Spaces. How do we go an hour and a half leading up to this
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. That was inspiring talking to Jimmy Lai. Now I'm joined by Jim Talon, a different Jim. Jim is the former senator from Missouri. I just spoke with Jimmy Lai from Hong Kong. That takes guts, Jim Talon, to do what he just did, which is to speak against Xi Jinping when you're in Hong Kong. He's been arrested twice. What do you think of that?
It does take guts. There's a lot of people in Hong Kong who have guts, and I don't think that story's been written yet by a long shot. That was really one of the most encouraging developments of the last couple of years, and it took Beijing completely by surprise. Yeah, they're trying to use the pandemic to suppress it, but I don't think it's going to be as simple as that.
You know, I was surprised by one answer. I asked him if Google and Facebook are helping or hurting. He said they're beside the point, that social media it doesn't matter. I wonder if he knows that Google is selling the tools of control to the PRC. At least that's my opinion.
Yeah, I think what I'm hopeful of, and I believe is very possible, is that when you have a long, extended kind of confrontation like this, and when you have so many smart and dedicated people among the protesters, that they're constantly figuring ways around the firewall, if you will. In other words, it's a back and forth. The Chinese try new things, and they find new ways around it, and I think maybe that's what he meant.
All right, now, Jim, I got to talk to you about Phase 4. I got Marco Rubio coming up. I talked to the vice president yesterday. I probably talked to 10 senators in 2 weeks. We got to get liability protections built into Phase 4, or we're not going to reopen this country. You know the plaintiffs' bar. You know that they own the Democratic Party, lock, stock, and barrel. Is it a bridge too far to try and get tort law preempted on COVID and move to one district in the federal courts?
Well, I don't think liability reform of some kind is a bridge too far. I think what you've got to do is get the agreement in principle, if you will, the deal, to use President Trump's terms, and then the details of it are going to have to be worked out. I mean, yeah, it could be one court like that. I'm not sure exactly how they'll do it. I think the Democrats want money for states, and of course, I think the Republicans already have agreed to and appropriated money for the states to deal with the cost of the coronavirus. The question is, are they going to provide money to help states who've been fiscally mismanaged for the last couple of decades? And I think if they're going to do that, in return for it, you ought to get a lot.
You know, the states are borrowing to cover their deficit on unemployment claims, and California borrowed just under $1 billion. I was stunned to see Connecticut borrowed $1.1 billion from the Treasury, and Illinois, Jim, borrowed $12 billion already. They're the most busted state I've ever seen. Why in the world would we give them anything?
Well, I agree with that. I think you could either just take the position, which they're doing now, that we're not going to provide funding for mismanagement over the last couple of decades, as opposed to funding to make up for shortfalls because of the pandemic, okay? Or what you could do is you could say, look, we'll talk about that in principle. We'll talk about bailing you out, but understand something. The federal taxpayers are going to bail you out for years of mismanagement unrelated to the pandemic, okay? Then we're going to take control over the state's finances so that the mismanagement doesn't continue. And that's the precedent. I mean, that's what we did with the District of Columbia 20 years ago.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. I've set up a financial control board. So, if we're going to pay the freight, we're going to get to decide what's on the trucks.
To stop the nonsense, because it's the crookedest state in the union. Yeah. And and Connecticut is not far behind. I mean, how can Connecticut borrow $1 billion for its unemployment fund when California only needs $850 billion? People should reflect on that.
And again, the distinction's important. To the extent you have a revenue shortfall this year because of the pandemic, that's largely, at least, not your fault, right? But if what you've got are bills from the last 10 to 20 years because you have been systematically underfunding your pension plan, nothing to do with the pandemic, and you want federal money to help you with that, you want the other states and the other states' taxpayers to bail you out because you didn't do what they did, you were irresponsible, then you don't get control of your budgets anymore. I think if they tell that to the governors, well, we'll talk about money, but then you're not going to be running your own show. And I don't think they're going to like that at all.
And so are you an optimist about a deal emerging from this?
I think yes, but I think it's going to take some time. I think there'll be further legislation. I think it'll take some time, and I think that's appropriate. I mean, they've already appropriated about $3 trillion or close to it. I think isn't that what Portman said when he was on the show?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, but I think it's going to take a little time, and it ought to take time. I mean, there's money in the system now. There may be a few areas where there's shortfalls, but there's basically money in the system now, so they don't have to rush this one through.
Yeah, are you optimistic about the reopening, Jim Talent? We got less than a minute. Do you think it's going well?
Yeah, I read a report that Art Laffer put out the other day, and, well, I don't know if it's going. I'm optimistic about the prospect. I think we can bounce back pretty quickly if we don't do seriously wrong things in the government. That's the issue.
Oil's up to $26 a barrel. The 10-year Treasury is climbing slowly. It's up to 0.71%. Those are good signs of stability, right?
Right, and the market has not dropped as much as in past real crises, nor has gold gone up as much as in past real crises, and those are good signs.
Jim Talent, always a pleasure. Follow me, America. The next segment, Chuck Todd joins me, then Elaine Chao, Marco Rubio, all in hour 3 of the Hugh Hewitt Show. Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Greetings to my 400 affiliates across this great country, grand the whole globe. Welcome. Yesterday, I asked the Vice President of the United States, will America's pastime be back? And the Vice President neither confirmed nor denied the rumor that is everywhere that July 1 is opening day and that spring training is going to resume in June. But the guy who knows everything inside the Beltway is Chuck Todd. If I had access to his text, I would know what was going on. But I'm going to ask you point blank, Chuck, first, I hope you're well. Second, do we get baseball back? What are you hearing?
Well, it's funny. I have a scout friend in one of the. I don't want to out the team, and that's what they're being told right now. June 10th is spring training, essentially some form of it, and an attempt at a July 1 open with a tentative plan that if your city, if you play in a city with an outbreak, maybe you go to your spring training facility. You know, they're trying to figure that out because, you know, it's not going to be clear which cities are safe in July and which ones aren't, things like that. But I'll be honest with you, this same friend of mine is also pessimistic that they just can get 30 clubs on the same page. I mean, that's the problem here, is they just don't know if they can cobble all that together, and that's you know, and that's what you're seeing now with college football. You know, you've got some idea of some teams that can play, but the real fear is how do you do that in a national schedule, in a national, when it's pretty clear there's going to be some places that are going to be in a different spot, right? Whether it's temporary, whatever it is, and that's, you know, it's just, that's the problem here, is that they can't predict where, right? It's a geographic issue.
Is it going to be with or without fans to the best of your buzz?
Oh, right now without fans.
Yep.
I think that's the liability issue there. Right now, it's, you know, the Korea thing. I think the Korea experiment is going to make leagues more comfortable with trying this.
Yeah, I agree, and I think they'll make enough revenue to pay something. I don't know what the collective bargaining agreement stipulates. That no one ever anticipated this, but it seems to me some revenue from broadcast is better than no revenue.
And you realize, you know, and just in the same way every business runs, I mean, look, this is going to cost them salary increases, not this year, but it's going to be next year and the year after, because all of these leagues run on revenue, contributes to the salary cap the next year, you know, all those things. So, you know, their revenues are going to shrink dramatically, and salaries are going to come down dramatically in the next few years if this continues.
You know, the people, last sports question, Chuck Todd, the people who signed long-term deals when they had 2 or 3 years of free agency, they're looking pretty smart right now versus those, and I'm thinking of Frankie Lindor in Cleveland. He could still do it. He's young. You sign a 10-year deal so that the check keeps coming, right?
You know, it's funny. I was actually being a friend of mine getting advice on contract employment, nothing to do with sports, but literally had, you know, this was going to be the big moment. And, you know, now this hits. And the debate is, do you go 1 year and roll the dice and see if the economic things are different? And this is not a sports world, but it's an interesting, and I think sports have to make some of those guys will make the same decision. Do I just sign a 1 year deal at a discount right now and see what the environment looks like and hope that I could get a healthier multi-year deal next year? Of course, things could be worse, right? It's a gamble.
You know, in February, after a month of I signed an 8-year extension with Salem, and people thought I was nuts. And I said, no, you know, I'm 64 years old. I just want to do this for 8 more years, and then I can go home.
There you go. Now you have certainty. Right. Now you have certainty.
Now, Chuck, let's talk about the biggest deal ever, this Phase 4. Now, I've talked to Cotton, Portman, I've got Rubio on today, Cruz, Grassley. Everybody says they have to have liability protection. Every business in America, yours, mine, everybody needs it. But, you know, the Democrats have got a lot of money riding on this from the trial bar. What do they do?
Well, I still think this is I personally think this whole liability thing's being slightly overhyped. But I get that it's something that sort of, that there's donors on both sides of the aisles that care a lot about this, so it animates this debate more than it should be. That said, the question is, I think everybody agrees there has to be some liability on this. The question is, what do you draw the line, right? That's the debate. Like, look at the meatpacking guys. they forced a Defense Production Act in motion, right? Why did they do it? They basically panicked on liability. All right.
Yep.
And from their point of view, you get why they did it in that moment, right? I'm not going to sit here and make a moral judgment in any of this right now, right? They made a business decision. They panicked. They went, oh, my God, we have outbreaks everywhere. This consolidation turned out to be a nightmare. We're in trouble. We got to get we've got to be ordered to open so that we got to be said that the government's forcing us to put lives at risk, right? So that in that sense, it's the government with the liability. But how do you incentivize the meatpacking industry to make sure they're going to have the most safe and secure environment that they can, right? So it's like, what does the shield look like that still forces them to be accountable on their safety? And I think that's look, if you and I could come up with the answer, there wouldn't be a debate, right? But that to me is what everybody's got to feel good about, right? Which is you're protecting them from indiscriminate lawsuits, but but they have an incentive to keep things as clean and as safe as possible.
You know, I do think there's a path there. It's called reckless disregard of best practices. I just think it needs to be preempted into the federal courts so we don't have 50 different systems working on this. Chuck, let me turn to last hour I talked to Jimmy Lai.
Everything we're doing, and sadly, the way the federal government has designed this, everything is 51 solutions right now. And I think we're going to regret this.
That will not work for tort reform. It just won't. But let me turn to Hong Kong. Last hour I had Jimmy Lai on as a billionaire, probably the most courageous man in the world. He's been arrested twice. Xi Jinping hates him. He comes on the radio show to talk about free speech in Hong Kong, and he's in Hong Kong. I think China is going to drive this election in a lot of ways. What do you think?
I don't know. I mean, I think the Trump campaign has to. I think right now the only path to re-election is to deflect blame and say this is China's problem and you can't trust the Democrats to be tough enough on China. Like that, you can sort of see what the president's re-election message, or at least if Pompeo were running things, it would definitely be, I think, the re-election message. But you see a sort of where the rhetoric is going there. I think it's where a lot of Senate Republicans are more comfortable. They're like, Mr. President, you want us to support you. We're not going to support your decision making, but we'll support your philosophy on China. So it is a way to unite the party too. We'll see. I don't know how you trump the pandemic and the economic. I mean, I think China's a part of this. I think if it is as big a part, if it is the driver of this campaign, then that's the path for re-election to Trump. I'm just not convinced it will be.
Well, I am leaning that way, but I'm also wondering, I'm trying to think, what does the vice president's campaign, Vice President Biden, do to counter that? And thus far, I haven't seen any messaging on China, Chuck Todd. I don't know that they have a bad one or a good one. I just don't think they've gotten there yet. Have you noticed the same absence of a strategy?
Well, I think there is this sense that look, beating up on China is always good politics in the Midwest. Obama did it to Romney, turned Romney into the China
you're
guy
right. You're right.
In 12, and it helped Obama carry Iowa, Ohio, the whole, basically the whole industrial Midwest. And so we know, he has to have a fairly potent tough on China stance. But the question is, do you follow Trump down that path on China, or do you stick to a domestic economic recovery messaging plan, right? That could be the alternative way they focus. I mean, I will say this: they got to be proactive somewhere here, and on an economic recovery plan, I think is the place he needs to be.
Who's the strongest Democrat on China? I really don't know. No one springs to mind. I'm thinking of Chris Coons, who's been a human rights.
I'd say Sherrod Brown and Chris Murphy are pretty both in their own way.
Sherrod Brown, I know can he back away from the woman on the ticket thing? Can he back away from the woman on the ticket?
Nope. I don't think under any circumstance.
Who is the toughest?
Under any circumstance. Probably, in some ways it's Warren. You can make an argument there. I mean, the other thing that there's tension with Midwestern senators, and I'm thinking Amy Klobuchar here, is that these ag deals are important to the Midwestern senators in China, right? So there's always that tension a little bit on that front for some of them, because the ag community really, at least until recently, has been has wanted China as a market. So that has all of those Midwestern senators, regardless of party, has been softer on China on some of those issues.
Fascinating. Amy's stock maybe just went up. Amy Klobuchar. Chuck Todd, carry on.
Right,
Good to talk to you, my friend. Follow him on Chuck Todd. See him on Sunday, because if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press. Don't go anywhere, America. I'll be right back on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Prison Fellowship's Angel Tree Summer Camps. Click on the banner at hughhewitt.com.
22 minutes after the hour, America. This is Tarzana Joe music.
Is it really?
He's got pearly whites. Hello, Joe. Tarzana Joe, the poet laureate of the Hugh Hewitt Show's a day early because tomorrow's VE Day celebration.
All right, let me get these teeth whitening plates out of my mouth. Hold on. I'll be ready. Here I am. Okay, I'm fine. I usually do that early in the morning. I don't know what that doesn't. It doesn't suit me at all. I'm not a nasty shark-like person, but my poem may be a little bitter today, so let's go. I'm sure you're sick and tired of those caterwauling voices lamenting each election that we really have no choices, or even of some pundit acting like a kind confessor, advising of two evils you must always choose the lesser. I, for one, have always known we'll never find perfection. I bear that fact in mind each time I'm making my selection. But now I start to understand this broad dissatisfaction. But with this crisis growing, I see no clear course of action. No one with the power making liberty their mission. No one in my government espousing my position. No one has the answer. There's no course that they can teach. To say it's safe to jog, but not to sit down on a beach. Or why if I buy barbells at a Target I'll survive, but not if I buy golf balls across the street at the Big Five. Why science says that kids don't transmit COVID as a rule, but government in panic says that kids can't go to school. I am old and weak, and though I like to run and ride, I'll do my civic duty and agree to stay inside. To the young among you, take this challenge that I give. Tell the folks in power they must let the country live. That's Freedom of Choice by Tarzana Joe.
Can we get a mask poem next week to protect me from the anti-vaxxers out there who won't wear a mask and are mad at me, Joe?
People are mad at you?
Yeah, because I want them to wear masks in supermarkets and when they bike.
The bikers, I've noticed, we have a bike path right by our house, and the bikers don't like to wear masks. They think they're going too fast to have mask-positive experiences, I guess.
And they're wrong, but they are arrogant. Joe, so I'm going to look for Joe to come up with a poem on the arrogant of the super fit and the scooter crowd next week. Joe, are you still taking commissions at TarzanaJoe at Reagan.com?
Absolutely.
TarzanaJoe at Reagan.com for all your poetry needs. Thank you, Joe. Time for me to check the pre-market report, which is important because things look good. Can I really say that? Oil is up to $26 a barrel. The 10-year Treasury is up to 0.71%. This is brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com. Andrew DeRay, Todd Avakian, together are with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. And AndrewandTodd.com is where you go to start your application to refinance your house and save maybe hundreds, possibly thousands of dollars a month. You might want to buy a new house because I just read in the journal yesterday the house market is still hot because the interest rates are at their all-time lows. Bottom, full stop, all-time lows. Now, please don't, people need their help. They're very trusted. People get in line to work with AndrewandTodd.com. They call 888-888-1172, and they get back to everyone. Don't be a looky-loo. If you refinanced 2 months ago, you're not going to do better than 2 months ago. But if you haven't refinanced in a year, or you're about to buy a new house, or maybe you're a senior citizen who needs to get money out of their house, please go to AndrewandTodd.com. Overseas, both England and Germany up about 1%. Yesterday, the Dow was down 218. The NASDAQ was up 45. I'm looking for a great Thursday in the markets, America. A great Thursday. I'm not a prophet nor the son of a prophet, but now is the time to refinance. Now is the time to buy real estate. Go to AndrewandTodd.com. It's also the time to please go to HughHewitt.com and find the Angel Tree banner at the top. Please do that. The Angel Tree banner at the top is where you go to contribute $200 to help a kid whose mom or dad is in prison. We're going to be able to send some of these kids to camp. It appears that a few camps are going to be able to open in safe places. The kids who can't go to camp, we're going to get them a box of blessings, $150 worth of coupons for good food, sports equipment, a note from their mom or dad in prison. Please help. This audience always supports 1,000 kids. Be part of that group. Angel Tree banner is near the top of HughHewitt.com. Please go and be generous. $200 supports one kid. If you can do 5, please do 5. They need your help. Be kind. I'll be right back with Elaine Chao, Secretary of the Department of Transportation, next. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Inside the Beltway, all across this country, people are driving, they're on airplanes, they're on railroads, and they are all overseen in whole or part by the Department of Transportation. I'm joined now by the Secretary of that department, Secretary Elaine Chao. Madam Secretary, good morning. Great to have you on the program.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm a great fan.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Now, you are in a position of regulating trucks, airplanes and airports, trains, highways. I want to walk through them all, but I want to start with a preliminary question. I don't know how this country is ever going to stand back up its transportation system without liability protection for the people who operate it. Are you hearing that from the people that you regulate, the airlines and the trucking companies, that they need to be protected from the plaintiff's lawyers bar?
I do. I think that's I think that's an important point because I think there will be some hesitation, some concerns about coming back to work, and there will be some workers who have to come back because they're essential, and so I think there can be a great deal of concern about litigation. I do hear that quite a bit.
So I think that's the number one priority because we cannot, I will make this as a statement, then ask your comment. We cannot stand the economy back up unless the transportation infrastructure is functioning at near to 100%. You agree with me, Secretary Chao?
Absolutely, because the transportation systems of our country are critical to our nation's economy. I mean, they are responsible for basically keeping the supply chain moving, which allows store shelves to be restocked for medical equipment and supplies to go from where they need to go. And, you know, the supply chain, who would have thought that would be on everyone's concern and mind these days? So our focus at the department is to keep the transportation system safe and operational so that our economy can come back strong. And this administration and the department, have taken a lot of actions to provide unprecedented, immediate emergency relief to American families, workers, and businesses, employers.
Let's walk through each sector. There are 3.5 million trucks on an average day, not a COVID day, but on an average day, there are 3.5 million trucks on the highway. Now, I'm a big fan of C.J. Box's book, The Highway, which is not very flattering towards one trucker, but it's very flattering towards the industry. How is that industry faring? Is it safe to go from Flying J to Pilot to all the other truck stops? These truckers work around the clock. Is it safe for them?
These truckers are our heroes because they are keeping the supply chain open and they're basically allowing America to still operate, to still function because of their actions, their courageous actions. We're able to stay home and self-quarantine, shelter in place, whatever. We have worked a lot with the truckers and the truck companies. We've actually provided over 1 million masks to help them as they go in and out of different places. So just a couple of examples of stuff we've done, like some of the states were closing their rest areas. Obviously, it's very important. And even when some of the states opened up their rest areas, the dining facilities were still closed. So the Federal Highway Administration, which is part of DOT, basically gave a waiver to allow food trucks to be at these rest areas.
Oh, smart.
To be able to provide food for the truckers. Also, recently, a while ago, there was some talk about quarantine New York City, that there had to be a 14-day quarantine for people going into New York City. And obviously, that would not work for truckers. So we went to the President's task force, of which we are a member of the department, and we surfaced this problem, and within 24 hours, truckers got renewed guidance as to what they need to do to protect themselves, to social distance, to be careful when they interact with others, to rely, for example, on electronic receipts rather than paper receipts, real commonsensical stuff like that. And they were able to, leave New York City and then drop off their load and then leave immediately so that they can keep the economy going. And then we've also given some commonsensical regulatory relief. For example, some of these truckers are going to have their licenses expire during this time. Well, they can't renew them because the state DMVs are closed. Also, there'll be like learner's permit, commercial driver's license learner's permit that requires a commercial driver license holder to sit next to them as they drive. But, these are, so we've provided a third, basically temporary waiver until June 30th. These are very commonsensical. They do not compromise safety, but they keep the wheels, these big truckers going so that they can help the rest of us.
All right, let me turn
They're
to
real
airplanes.
American heroes. I cannot speak enough of them.
They are, and I pass them. I always pass them with a bit of trepidation, but I pass them with a great deal of appreciation now. Airplanes and airports. Most of the airplanes are empty. I asked the vice president yesterday, age discrimination is not a constitutionally prohibited thing. Can we look forward to some air flights that are limited to people who are, say, 50 and younger or 40 and younger in order to encourage people who are genuinely and generally immune to the ravages of the virus and segregate them from older people and put older people on flights like they have older times for shopping? Is that something that's kicking around DOT, Madam Secretary?
I think that would be really hard to do. The airline industry has had their share of criticism, but they are really hurting. Passenger volume fell 96%. So the passenger volume on the airplanes is basically 4% of what it was prior to pandemic. And also the number of airplanes in the air has dropped by about 70%. So the number of airplanes actually in the air dropped 70%. So this industry is hurting bad. Now, the president signed the CARES Act on March 27th, giving about $50 billion to the airline industry, but it's not to them alone. It's to travel agents and also to contractors that supply catering, for example, on the ground to the airlines. It comes in both loans and grants, a portion. And the main purpose was for them, the airlines, to maintain their payroll. Because, again, the president's really concerned about employment, jobs, and we want to preserve these jobs. So when I said that the president provided unprecedented immediate emergency relief, to the transportation system, basically American tax dollars have been responsible for $86 billion to the transportation industry.
But when I go back to flights that are age restricted, it seems to me that would help them, because I think a lot of people want to fly, but they don't want to fly in a mixed crowd. Seniors don't want to fly with young people. Young people don't want to fly with seniors. I don't see any. Can we run some tests to see how that works? Because
What if you're one family? What if you're one family? You have your Grammy with you or your grandpa with you?
They don't fly. Grammy and Grandpa should stay home, right? That's what they should be doing.
I think as the economy opens, the president has a very commonsensical three-phase approach. There are certain benchmarks that give guidance as to when an economy should open up, and we should still, as we come back, practice social distancing. But we need to get the economy back while maintaining safety. No question about that. But these are questions which the airline are looking at themselves because it's in their own best interest. So, for example, recently, they, together with the flight attendants, have decided that they needed to have passengers wear masks. That's again a commonsensical practice that will help the wearer of the mask, the people around the person who wears the mask. It's just sort of an extra commonsensical step that we can take.
Now the president's talking about infrastructure, Secretary Chao, and I'm all for that, provided that they give the money to the counties. There are, 3,000 or 4,000 counties. Not a top down, but give the money to the county supervisors, not to the states to waste, but to the counties to fix stuff. Is there a plan for how to do infrastructure spending that does not repeat the mistakes of the Obama-Biden stimulus?
Absolutely. The president believes an infrastructure package is important. And we needed one even before this crisis began. He also believes that it's got to be bipartisan. And we've been in discussions with the Congress ever since February 12, 2018, when the president sent up his infrastructure bill. And so we still are talking about it. But regardless as to what happens in the next few weeks with emergency relief, there is a bill, a reauthorization of our nation's surface transportation bill that has to occur. And so that's a likely vehicle for moving significant infrastructure investments out to the cities and the states. But right now, the formula is to the states first. So we got to go through the governors in the states. And unless that is changed, we have to go through the states. And now from the states, the capitals, from the state capitals, the state houses, it will go on to the counties and the cities.
Well, I just don't trust state governments, but that's your problem, not mine. I just think it's so corrupt at the state level that if you get it to the counties, it works. Let me close by asking you about trains. I'm an Acela rat, right? I travel back and forth to New York to D.C. all the time. Do you think the trains are going to be able to reopen safely anytime soon? They've got to be cleaned top to bottom every day after every trip, basically before and after everyone gets on.
All the modes of transportation have to reassure the traveling public of the cleanliness of the mode. So, for example, cabins have to be clean, rail cars have to be clean, transit cars have to be clean. All these companies and organizations have to ramp up their cleaning protocol and sanitation protocol as well. But we've got to have all these transportation modes come back. You'll be pleased to know that Acela is going to be coming back, I believe, June 1st.
Oh.
Because, they've got to keep it going, and, it's another alternative to the Northeast Corridor and elsewhere around the country as well.
Last question, Secretary Chao. When do you expect us to be at least 75% open on the transportation networks? When do we get 3/4 of the way back?
It cannot happen fast enough for me. I think we need to, again, we need to reopen America again. And we need to have people working. Because the numbers just came out today for the unemployment claims filed. And basically, while it's been a downward trend, but still 3.2 million people, additional people, filed for unemployment insurance this past week. That means that 33 million people are unemployed in our country in about 5 weeks. That's
remarkable.
Devastating.
Well, I appreciate all you're doing. I saw you were in Pittsburgh talking about the Pittsburgh airport yesterday. In my opinion, Madam Secretary, you can put Pittsburgh at the bottom of your list, but the rest of the stuff, please get up to Cleveland and Ohio and do a good job. Thank you for joining me, Madam Secretary. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
They are doing a great job. It's amazing. 3.5 million truckers, airplanes. It's all the infrastructure that we need to get done. That's the first thing that has to stand up. She did a bit. I was doing my preparation last night, and I watched her doing a bit on the Pittsburgh airport, and I thought, now that is money not well spent. I don't think the Pittsburgh people know how to get to the airport. I'll have to ask Selena Zito about that. In the meantime, wear your mask. My Washington Post column has got hundreds of comments agreeing with me that people need to wear their masks, especially you bicyclists. But whether you agree with me or not, takeyourrelieffactor.com. Please, I've got 3 of these left. Even if you're going to be on a scooter like Dwayne, which doesn't require any exercise, even if you're going to do that, it's got some motion in it that Dwayne doesn't move much, and so he's going to need relieffactor.com. You're all going to need relieffactor.com. $19.95 gets you started. You're getting older, and when you get back to work or you get back to the gym, you're going to say, I was lifting 220, I was bench pressing 250. Right before the shutdown, I can do that again. No, you're going to pull muscles. You're going to be sore. ReliefFactor.com. I carry curcumin, resveratrol, omega, the 4 natural supplements that I take and tell you about 3 times a day. Please join the crowd. Tens of thousands of us take it every day. And then come right back after the break. Marco Rubio is next. He did wonders on the small business program. Will he do wonders to protect them from the trial lawyers? We'll ask him right after the break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. 3.2 million new unemployment claims this week. It would have been a lot higher except for the CARES Act. The CARES Act has a lot of architects, but I think the principal architect is Marco Rubio, senator from Florida. He joins me now. He and Ben Cardin worked on the PPP, which has saved, I think, millions of jobs. Senator Rubio, welcome and congratulations on that effort.
Well, it's still a work in progress, but I think ultimately when you put something together as quickly as we had to and had to be implemented as quickly as it needed to be, it certainly has exceeded those expectations. As of today, we have well over 4 million small businesses in this country that have received payroll support, and that represents tens of millions of jobs. And, we saw yesterday ADP reported, the payroll company, there was 20 million private sector jobs in America were eliminated in the month of April. I think that number would have been substantially higher had it not been for PPP. But now obviously we're kind of looking into the future here, and this is obviously going to be a longer term problem than we had hoped.
I think the refilling the PPP tank is definitely going to be on the table. But talk to me, Senator Rubio, your chair of small business. A lot of these small businesses will not reopen if the plaintiff's bar is there like vultures to pick on their bones. I don't know how we reopen the country without some kind of liability protection. Are you part of the working group on that issue?
Well, I'm not on the working group on the issue, but it's certainly relevant to what we're working on in terms of getting small businesses support. They are by far the most vulnerable to that sort of activity. Look, we're not talking about excusing gross negligence here, okay? Some guy knows he has the virus and decides he's going to infect a bunch of people even though he's the business owner. I'm not talking about that. We're talking about I own a restaurant and some customer 2 weeks later gets the virus, and now I get hit with a lawsuit by some opportunistic employee claiming that they got it on that night in my restaurant. But the cost of litigating it alone is probably going to put me out of business, defending myself. That's a real problem. There are two hidden impediments to reopening parts of our economy. One is litigation and the other is schools. I mean, you can't get people back to work if their 9-year-old kid has to be home all day by themselves. So we've got two big impediments out there that we need to address for purposes of getting back getting to some new normal until we have a vaccine.
I talked with the vice president yesterday about a do-over year for schools, and he's chewing on that. But let's focus on this liability protection. There are precedents for picking a federal district court district, whether it's the Eastern District of Texas or the Southern District of New York. They do the royalties cases. The Eastern District does patent litigation, I believe. You pick one district of the federal courts and you say all tort claims based on COVID are going here. And then you set a standard, which is, I think, reckless indifference to best practices when it comes to sanitation. How hard is that to do, Senator Rubio?
No, I think it's not hard to do mechanically. I think it's hard to do politically. It's no secret that the trial bar is a major contributor to Democratic Party. In fact, I don't know, this has been really grossly underreported, but there was efforts a month before all this thing broke open. The masks that 3M makes, the masks that are now widely being used to protect people, the N93 mask, whatever the number is, those masks, those are the same masks that they use for industrial purposes. And so there was an effort in legislation to allow that to be mass-produced and used for that purpose, and it was blocked by Democrats on behalf of the trial bar who wanted to be able to sue. And there was a liability issue there. Now, ultimately, they relented. My point is they could have started rolling that out a long earlier. So it's just an example of the hold the trial bar has over the Democratic Party. So I think the impediment really is getting it passed, not so much implementing once it is.
Now, your colleague, Senator Scott, has said on this show he does not want to give any money to blue states that have been badly managed and red states that have been badly managed. He's not indifferent. He just cares about management. To me, it seems that the Democrats have got to have bailouts for places like Illinois that have already borrowed $12 billion from the Treasury. Isn't that going to be the trade-off, some additional relief for state and local governments and their employees and their unions in exchange for protecting America's small businesses from the plaintiff's bar? Isn't that the essential elements of a deal?
Yeah, I mean, I think you could see something like that coming together from a political and bargaining perspective. I would say that when it comes to local and state governments, I want to be clear about this. There are two separate things here. Number one is money you owe, liabilities you have because of mismanagement and bad decisions. We should not be bailing that out. And then there is some sort of basic baseline of revenue that you need to pay firefighters and garbage, pickup people and the sanitation department and your building and code division and your firefighters and police officers. There's a baseline revenue there that we can't allow to decline. Our system of federalism relies on local governments providing these basic services. And so there's a difference between funding those basic services, which they may need some help on, and extra money to help them service the debt they took on because they've mismanaged their pension fund. And again, I think it would be terrible precedent to use this crisis as an opportunity to allow them to come here and get bailed out for bad decisions on the pension side. But there is a baseline of operational revenue that local and state governments need to provide essential services, and that we cannot allow to collapse.
I agree. Last quick question, Senator. You almost retired. The Orlando shooting persuaded you not to. Are you glad you came back for a time such as this?
I can tell you that my second term has been much more rewarding, and we've gotten a lot more done. I think a lot of that has to do with being in the majority in the Senate, and obviously also having the White House. My relationship with the White House is very good, and we've gotten a lot of things done, both in legislation and in through executive actions because of it. So it's I'm glad. I am glad. I'm very, very happy the work we've been doing.
Senator Rubio, good to talk to you again. Keep coming back. Thank you,
yes,
Adam. Thank you, Dwayne. Thank you, Ben. All of you, tomorrow is the 75th anniversary of Victory in Europe special show. Do not miss it. Do not miss a minute of it with Dr. Larry Arnn of Hillsdale College as we celebrate victory over the Nazis tomorrow on the next Hugh Hewitt Show.